everybody. Welcome to First Glance with Jody Vance. And this is actually more like a second glance with our good friends at, now stay with me here, because you see the logo if you're watching as opposed to listening. You might see Replenish and hear Earth Renew and a forward and backwards momentum when it comes to branding here. And yet at the root, Keith, driver, the product, the end game, the result, the reason here remains largely the same. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having us back. Yeah, it's always interesting to do things in the middle of a brand remakeover, because I'm going on the road and all I have is Earth Renew cards, and all my materials are now newly printed that say Replenish. So for another week or so, I'm going to be juggling this, and then the official change will have come. The board approved Replenish Nutrients to align with our products, and we're working our way that way.
And it's a really interesting company, frankly. And I remember as soon as I saw Earth Renew Inc., I'm like, oh, hey, I get to talk to Keith again, because I got so jazzed when you were explaining what you're all about. And Replenish Nutrients makes so much sense. Tell people who maybe haven't watched the first episode where we laid it all out, just give us a synopsis of what Replenish Nutrients is all about.
Sure. So when I explain it, it's going to feel really on the nose. So we're talking about rebuilding the soil by building back the nutrient capacity and the organic carbon in the soil. So we really are replenishing the nutrients in the soil so that they're available for the plants to grow. So it's really on the nose. It really fits with what we're doing. The Earth Renew is a bit esoteric for some folks, and we're saying, actually, no, we're really focusing on the nutrient in the soil and building back that part of it. So a little more alignment with our products and sort of explaining exactly what we do.
So in explaining what you do, because you did take me on that journey, and Replenish definitely does hit it on the nose, where Earth Renew, because I've spoken to you before, you're renewing, you're rejuvenating, you're putting back in what anybody who has culture cultivated or utilized, farmed or otherwise in soil knows that you have to replenish it, whether you're rotating crops or you're fertilizing, whether you're utilizing even for the layman's garden, if you're adding a little bit of manure to just give some more nutrients and replenishment back into whatever you might be growing. So that's, the easy way to come about this. The cool part of your company, I think, is what puts you apart from the typical fertilizer. Explain that.
Sure. So we use mineral fertilizers, so naturally occurring fertilizers, and we upcycle those from various sources. So our sulfur comes from a waste product from oil and gas. We get our compost comes from waste from people's houses, and we get the potash as a byproduct of potash production that comes in. So we upcycle those supplies. The advantage of that is we don't go through a chemical process like the traditional fertilizer guys. So we don't have that chemical salt included in our product. We have very low salt index. And what happens is if you keep putting more and more salt on the soil over time, you get those white rings that you see in farmers' fields, which are just dead zones where the salt has built up. Our salts are actually there as minerals, which are usable by the plant. And so we're actually trying to build back the minerals and the nutrients in the soil and not keep layering on, salt, which, as we all know, things don't grow well in salty water. So
it is so cool what you do, because as you kind of glossed over the part that I find so fascinating is you utilize the byproduct of what typically people would consider waste or unusable pieces of the food chain puzzle. I don't know what the correct terminology is, but you're upcycling in a way that, so many people are looking for investments, frankly, that fit into a category of how do I take what's here and utilize it in a way that's meaningful and moving forward in an environmental sense of the word. And certainly Replenish Nutrients, or formerly known as Earth Renew Inc., because your stock symbol is ERTH. You're doing it. You're literally doing it.
Yeah, and it's part of that concept of sort of the circular economy, where the waste from one side. So we hear all this, all those the food waste, all those nutrients, we're going to put them back on the land, and that's going to build back the soil. Well, actually, you need a way and a reason to make that economically beneficial. So just putting compost back of itself, that's a $10 a ton product. If you blend it with the other nutrients, now it's a $500, $600, $700 a ton product. So there's money in it for the farmer to accept those materials onto their farms. It's worth it for them to offset what they would have otherwise paid, that $50 an acre they pay every year, depending on the crop and otherwise, but in nutrients,
Right.
It's worth it. And so we're just enabling one more part of that circular economy. So we don't really take credit for the composting. Someone else is doing that. But if we don't take that compost and get rid of it for them, eventually they can't make more. So we have to find these complementary technologies, and ours is really focused on taking those materials and getting them economically and agronomically more for the farmers, as opposed to like take our waste and do something with this and just don't complain. It's like, actually, no, let's create value for the farmer. Let's create value for the overall ecosystem. And then the farmer ends up with more value in their crops, and the cycle can continue year over year.
It's a win, 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 which typically adds up to good business. We're with Keith Driver, who is bringing to the table Earth Renew Inc. that is becoming Replenish Nutrients, the brand Replenish Nutrients. Will the stock symbol remain ERTH? I mean, Earth is Earth.
Oh, till the end of time, we're going to keep that ERTH symbol. I have 2 degrees in environmental engineering and an MBA in environmental management. So like, that's mother's milk to me, is having the ERTH symbol, and I feel that we live up to that value, and it sets a good direction for us. As far as market recognition in our consumer products, the farmers, it's a nutrient efficiency game for them, and so we're really trying to align on. We went from, was it $7 million of sales 2 years ago, 15 million last year, we could be up near 30 this year. Like, we really have to pivot from being a story we tell investors to really speaking to our core market of buyers and making sure that aligns all the way through. And it was easier to do that with the name, keep the stock symbol for direction.
Obvious reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was a little bit of a rhetorical question. Like, who gives up Earth as a stock symbol? I know you must have been like, I won the lottery when we secured ERTH. Earth is the stock symbol, Canadian Stock Exchange symbol. Now, last week we learned new emissions regulations in Europe that could eventually hit Canada. Your thoughts on that?
So we've been hearing about that all week, and Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned or announced a 30% reduction in fertilizer. And it's actually not a 30% reduction in fertilizer. It's a 30% reduction in N fertilizer. And there's 4 macros, N, PKS. We sell PK and S. So it doesn't really affect us from a volume gain. But it does affect us because if you have, the reason we put on so much nitrogen on the soils is because the soils themselves aren't as productive. So our products are actually on the path for farmers to get to that 30% reduction in nitrogen. If you put on chemical fertilizers, they can either leach out, so they get washed away, or they volatilize and turn into gases. And nitrogen turns into nitrous oxide, which is a 300 plus times greenhouse gas. So that's what this regulation is targeting, is nitrogen use efficiency. And farmers put on way too much nitrogen for what the crop needs because it can rain, it can get hot, and it doesn't all get to the root zone because the soil isn't healthy. If you have healthy soils, you actually put on less nitrogen. So those farmers will actually see a reward from this regulatory piece. Well, I mean, maybe not a reward. It'll help motivate the move towards this, incent that behavior by allowing that cost to pass through the system. So I'd call it tailwinds for us, and for the conventional fertilizers, we're going to see a lot of innovation around slow release fertilizers and a lot of research going to finding more efficient ways, which more efficient ways means cheaper product on the shelf, which means more value to the farmer. It again can, if we let this innovation flow through, a couple of years from now, we'll all look back and go, wow, I can't believe we were that inefficient given where we've gotten to. And so we're really, I'd say excited about regulation, but we're really interested to see how this is going to motivate and accelerate a move towards regenerative agriculture, which is obviously near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, that's the goal here, right? And it's a goal that could expand beyond the market that you're currently impacting. As you were speaking to your growth, you were talking about the millions and then the tens of millions and your targets moving forward. For somebody who's like, you know what, I'm in Replenish Nutrients, I'm going in ERTH stock symbol. I'm going to look you up. I'm going Keith Driver. Okay, replenishnutrients.com, wants to get involved. What might they expect in those next couple of years? We're in a really volatile moment in time, especially when it comes to agriculture, clearly with what's going on in Ukraine and the bread basket of Europe, and how farmers here will be looked to really step up the game and try and shore up some of the shortfalls, right? I mean, there's a bigger picture at play here.
Yeah, so there's I mean, people always have to eat. So we're seeing prices of those crops rise, and they're sort of equilibrating now a little bit, so that the shock of the war has kind of worn itself into the market. With that, because potash, a good portion of the world's potash comes out of Belarus and that region as well, we also saw potash spike and nitrogen spike and all these other things spike, and they've equilibrated as well. They're still way high, but the difference is the cost of nutrients per acre has not gone up as fast as the value of the crop coming off. So farmers aren't really going to sacrifice this year. They don't have to pick, because the value equation has just moved up. It's a bit of a higher stakes game, but the odds are still this year in the farmer's favor in terms of how the commodity markets are lying. So we're seeing motivation for people to change, because our products are equivalent value, slightly lower cost, better in the long run. So next time things spike, they'll be more buffered from that. So we're seeing this as a real positive, which is why, like, for fundamentals, like, I come from a private equity background, 200% growth year over year. This year, we're going to shove every ounce of energy we have into pushing as much through the pipeline, because we're going to sell out again this year. We have more capacity, but we're going to sell out. Went from 2 sites to 7 blending sites this year, and it still may not be enough. And so, first world problems, woe is me kind of thing. But at the same time, this is the time to prove to our customers and to get that volume out. And that will then allow us to quite easily come in behind with more capacity year over year, because the market likes a 200% growth story year over year. That's fantastic. 5 years in a row, which is what we're gunning for, would be a pretty good track record for most management teams to be able to pull off, and especially in agriculture, where it tends to be slow in the first years. If 200% is slow, we're going to be hanging on for dear life here in the next few years.
Okay, so I'm going to pretend like I'm doing the job interview for the people that are watching or listening here on EQUITY.GURU, or First Glance with Jody Vance, dedicated viewers or listeners that like to know where they're going to invest their money. So if I had to ask you that question, that is, okay, a lot of good news here, Keith. I like what you're saying. What's your challenge? Where's your vulnerability or downside? Is there one?
There's a couple of challenges. Right now, people is a challenge. We tend to do better because we at least have an ESG side to offer folks. So there's at least a way to explain to people that you're really doing good work, but it's still a challenge, particularly because we work in a lot of rural environments. And this year, everyone's working on the farm because there's huge value in the farm. And so there's that struggle. We're also trying to do capital projects at a time when the price of products and the delivery timelines and everything are a bit unknown. So that's why we chunked off this DeBolt project. We own the land, we own the building. We're going to put up another building here in the fall, so that all the construction work we do is inside, so that we didn't do the big Bethune project this year, the 200,000 ton project. We're going to do a 50,000 ton project, just to make sure we're balancing risk and reward for where we are as a company. Now, that is probably just prudent, and ideally, we're being a little over prudent in this market, but it's been so spiky that we're just, we're wanting to make sure that our business continues to grow steadily, as opposed to taking big swings for the fences, which have a real, a larger risk profile right now. And DeBolt for us is, it's home turf. We have people there working. We already push a lot of product through that site, and this is just adding some more equipment to that.
Right. Supply and demand, as you said, pushing more through the pipeline and selling out year over year, looking solid. ERTH, ERTH, is the Canadian Stock Exchange symbol, ERTH. Earth Renew Inc. has been the name, but as Keith mentioned, in the days to come, that will be shifting over to what you see over his shoulder. If you're not watching, I'll tell you, it's Replenish Nutrients. That's what you need to be looking at. And if you want to go online and find out more investor information, go to replenishnutrients.com. Keith Driver, always a pleasure to chat with you. Keep me up to speed, won't you?
Absolutely. Happy to come back anytime. Thanks, Jody.